Right, so yeah, we're going to be talking about evidencing effective use of data today, and just going to quickly look through the agenda. First of all, introductions. I'll introduce myself first of all. My name is Sue Hayes. I'm a subject and curriculum advisor for Learning by Questions. I've got 15 years teaching experience in a secondary maths classroom, and 6 of these as head of department. My current role with Learning by Questions involves writing content and question sets for specifically secondary maths. I do still do a bit of teaching at some local football academies, so I get my teaching fix for about 5 to 6 hours a week, so I still keep my hand in. Today joining me on the webinar is my colleague Al. Al, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. So my name's Al. I did my PGCE all the way back in 2001, and in my teaching career I've held various positions in schools, so classroom teacher, assistant head of department, assistant vice principal, but all of those positions have been science related. I came out full-time teaching about 18 months ago, so sort of like the rigors and the challenges of everyday life in a school are still sort of I'm still getting over it, still very fresh in my memory.
Thanks, Al. Okay, so just going to have a quick overview of the session now and what we're going to be looking at. So we're going to spend a bit of time looking at what effective use of data is. We'll be also considering what data collection methods we can use. We will be looking at what's the purpose of collecting any data. And as Talitha mentioned before, we're going to be looking at using LBQ to support evidencing effective use of data. And at this point, we are going to get interactive, and we will get you onto our platform so you can see exactly how Learning by Questions works, what the children see, what kind of feedback they get, and then ultimately for this session, data that's produced as a byproduct of that. And after that, there'll be a question and answer session. So I know Talitha's already mentioned, if you've got any questions or queries, or you want to raise any points, pop it in the chat, and Talitha will manage that, and it'll either be dealt with during the webinar or at the end, where we'll have a little question and answer. Okay, so moving on, what is the effective use of data? And I think this depends, a lot of things depends on your role as a teacher in school, where you are in the school, but I think data is most effective when it is used to directly improve pupil performance. Certainly as a classroom teacher, that should be one of the main considerations that you are thinking about. So we're going to look at some key considerations here and just break this down a little bit. So the first one, what is the purpose of data collection? It's always really important to have a purpose in mind when you are looking at collecting data, because otherwise, why are you doing it? So there should always be a very clear purpose. And as mentioned previously, these are going to vary massively depending on your role in school. And I'm going to go to Al at this point, because I know Al's served several different roles in secondary school. So what are your experiences of this, of the different purposes for data collection now? You're on mute. Right?
What I said was so profound as well, I'll never be able to repeat it. No, what you said absolutely hit the nail on the head. As teachers, we put an awful lot of work into collecting data, an awful lot of time. We do a fantastic job. But if that data isn't being used for the benefit of the students, then are we not wasting our time? So any data we collect, absolutely 100% has to be reflected in something that the student experiences on the other side of that. Now, yeah, we collect it in lots of different ways, I suppose. If I'm a classroom teacher, some of the best data I can collect would be just formative data, just through question and answer sessions or conversations with students, and that type of data is brilliant for those sort of in the moment decisions you make as a teacher, where you can react specifically to what you spot as a misconception or a misunderstanding with a student. Some of the best lessons you might have is where you're on the fly collecting data and you realize that the lesson plan maybe you've got in store isn't quite suitable for the kids. We need to spin everything around and go in a different direction. Some of the best lessons in teaching come out of that. Get some fantastic moments. But as good teachers, you do that all the time. That is what you do. That's what teaching is, interacting with kids and bouncing off the feedback from them. But it's very, very hard to evidence that kind of that kind of use of data, that kind of intervention. So as a classroom teacher, we know that we also have to collect a lot of hard data. We know that we need summative data. We've got to mark assessments, and we've got to collect some numbers from those assessments that we can then use later on. As a head of department, what are we going to use data for? We're going to use it for our setting. We're going to consider how how we're going to set our groups, particularly in maths and science, where we've still got tier entries that we've got to consider. We're going to use that data to inform CPD. We're going to use that data to try and identify maybe trends within our own teaching. Maybe we've got a department full of NQTs, and speaking to the science teachers out there, maybe they're struggling in how to explain out of context topics like electrolysis or half equations. So maybe the data can inform CPD. And also, as head of department, we're going to be looking at using data to form intervention groups, or to inform intervention groups, and revision timetables and revision schedules and things like that. And then obviously an SLT level, we're looking at getting a whole school picture. And I'm not going to say the issue that teachers work really, really hard, but at an SLT or head of department level, when you're being requested as a teacher for data, there's an awful lot of pressure on you to have that data to be as robust as it possibly can be. So that sort of on-the-fly formative data, they're not really going to accept that as something they can use to base whole school strategies on. So the need for hard data is real, and I'm sure we're all aware of that. And I've probably waffled a little bit there, Sue, so I'll send it back to you.
That's right. Thank you, Al. Yeah, I think you've covered a lot of content there. But yeah, there are definitely different purposes depending on your role. Okay, so looking at our next point, how am I going to collect the data? And you did touch on a few things that you could do here. And again, I think how you're going to collect the data is dictated by the purpose. So depending on the purpose, it's going to tell you which way you're going to collect it. So you mentioned about quick question and answer sessions for your formative data in class, or maybe standardized assessments so you can assess your tier entries and things like that. So specifically on data collection, what bits have you used as part of your teaching, Al?
I think I like to think of data collection in three sort of categories. You've got your high frequency, your medium frequency, and your lower frequency. That high frequency data collection comes in the form of, like we said, your question and answer sessions. Teachers out there may get great benefit out of using traffic light cards to assess, children holding up red, green, amber, etc., or mini whiteboards. One thing I used to do an awful lot, especially for sort of year 11 groups, was to use sort of iterative starters. So for example, students would come in, they do a 10 question starter at the beginning of a lesson based on something that they'd done in the previous year, something that they might have forgotten, for example, something we want to ensure that's still fresh in the mind. So that kind of high frequency stuff is absolutely fantastic. We've got our medium frequency sort of data collection, which will come in the form of marking books, for example, or those maybe weekly tests. And then our lower frequency data collection will come in the form of our summative assessments, where we are spending hours marking books, we are spending hours inputting that, marking tests, and we are spending hours putting that data into a spreadsheet and doing some sort of really in-depth question level analysis.
Yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, again, there's lots and lots of different ways to collect data. You've just mentioned the word analysis, and that's what we're coming to next. That, once you've collected your data, in order to make it have the most effect, you want to analyze it and make it have some impact. And one of the things that I found with this was sometimes it was this process of analysing the data that took the time. What are your thoughts on this, Al?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody out there, as soon as we say question level analysis, we can see the use of it, and everybody's face is like, oh yeah, that's my weekend gone. It's a big old job. But let's not ignore though the sort of higher frequency, how we can use the higher frequency sort of data analysis as well. At the end of the day, the purpose of all of it is to benefit the students by finding gaps in their knowledge. So as a teacher level, a simple question and answer session, if James in the corner, and again, I'm speaking to the science teachers perhaps, asks you what the difference between an atom and an ion is, then you know, without collecting any other data, that there's no point talking to them about electrolysis half equations just yet. They're not at that point. So as a teacher, again, yes, we use our experience and we use it really well, and we intervene there and then in the moment in the lesson. But that kind of data, maybe I'm repeating myself, but that kind of data is very, very difficult to quantify and pass on to the head of department or our SLT link, who wants something really, really robust. As much as we might know where James's high points and low points are, for example, a head department wants something that's quantifiable, robust, and can be considered to be consistent without teacher bias amongst all the sets. So we can't really get away from the fact that we need hard assessment data, assessment that's been sat by all students across the board, that a proper question level analysis can be taken, or we can use use for a proper question level analysis.
Right, there we go. I thought more was coming then. Okay, and I think obviously you just ended on the question level analysis, which we do know you can lose weekends and single weeks at times to that. I guess there's always a sort of question to raise: is this an effective use of my time? What do you think on that point?
I think if you can sit back and say, I have spent this amount of time collecting data, and I can see reflected in the classroom how that has benefited the student, then yes, it is an effective use of your time. If you can't, then you need to sit back and say, well, what am I actually doing with this data? Am I collecting it just so I can show it somebody? Right? And we know we have to do that. We know we have to pass on to our SLT link, our head departments, but at that point, is it then being effectively used? And I think there's a responsibility at all different levels in a school, whether you're a teacher, middle leader, SLT, that the data you get isn't there just to judge performance of a class or judge performance of a teacher. We have to be flipping that around, and the kids need to be seeing the benefit of that. And it would be absolutely amazing if there was, for example, a tool out there that allowed us to do that with extremely little work.
Yeah, this kind of comes on to the next point that I'm going to make here at the end of this bit. It's about the timely use of data. And if you're doing your data collection in the form of assessment, you're then marking it, you're then analysing it, you're then deciding which interventions you're going to put in place. If that is taking too long, then almost a moment's lost, or certainly, it's going to be extremely effective, it's lost. So timeliness is really, really important. And again, depending on what you're doing for your data analysis and your data collection, the timeliness can be lost. So we're going to now dig down a little bit deeper into data collection and the different methods we can use. And again, it is really dependent on your role on this. So just looking at a few things here. So for instance, observing pupils in the classroom, it's qualitative data, but I think this is so valuable, mostly because the impact you have is there and then. It's in the moment, and you alluded to this before, Alistair, when you gave that example about ions. As soon as you know that someone doesn't get something in your classroom, you address it straight away, and it is so important, and a massive amount of learning comes from that, but it is really hard to evidence. And that's the thing, you're supposed to write down every question you ask in the lesson and who responds well to it. But I do think that qualitative data is crucial, and it's what we do day in, day out as teachers. It's our bread and butter. The next thing, sort of thinking about the formative assessments, so slightly more formalised than just general chat in the classroom. But if you're doing a whiteboard starter and you've asked a question, and you can see straight away that 30% of your kids in the class don't get it, that can straight away influence and think, right, well, where am I going to start the pitch of my lesson? I was going to pitch it slightly higher than where I'm at the moment. I'm going to have to take it back. And all of that stuff, it is data collection, but your response to it is so immediate, you probably don't even realise that it was data collection and you've actually acted on it. So evidencing that is particularly difficult to do. The other thing that sort of comes from there is, I remember back in the day when I did my teacher training back in the early 2000s, it was like having an up-to-date mark book and collating your homework and your classwork marks. And that's great, and it's a nice source of evidence, but I'm not entirely sure about the quality of the evidence, because if I see 6 out of 10 on a homework, what I'm really interested in is the 4 marks that they got wrong. That is the thing that is going to tell me something really, really important, and is going to enable me to push the learning on. So whilst it's useful and it's something that I could put forward maybe to help my tracking data, it's not the thing that's going to push the learning on, which is, again, probably the main purpose of me doing the homeworks in the first place. Summative assessments, obviously, I think this is probably one of the main things that teachers think about when you think about data collection. I think your go-to is to the summative, your end of topic test or your end of term test. And then obviously the beloved question level analysis, which is great. I love question level analysis. I just don't like having to do it because it takes far too long. But it tells you so much, and it tells you so much about what you need to do. So all of these methods for collecting data, you're trying to make sure it's fair. You're trying to make sure that a questioning class isn't biased. You're trying to ensure that it's accurate and effective and efficient. Have you got anything else to add on that point, Al?
I think you mentioned earlier on frequency, and when people talk about the frequency of data collection, that kind of sends shivers down your spine a little bit, thinking, oh, does this mean more marking? Does this mean more assessments I've got to do? I think the higher the frequency, the better. If we're smart about how we're collecting that data, and the higher the frequency we collect it, the better the chance we have of avoiding what I like to call sort of stop-start teaching. Imagine you teaching a lesson to somebody, and why not use electrolysis again? I do know more than electrolysis, but we'll go back to what's the word of the day. So let's imagine you teach electrolysis again, and you've got James in the corner who doesn't know what a cathode is or an anode, or never heard of the term electrode. If that can be picked up on immediately, then it can be acted upon immediately. But if these gaps and misconceptions aren't really picked up until the books are marked, 2 or 3 days later, or until an assessment is taken place, then the gap between that misconception forming and the gap between being able to do something about it, some cases it might even be too late to do something about it. That results in this sort of stuttered stop-start sort of learning. Whereas if we can identify these issues as soon as they arise, then we can get more of a smooth sort of continual bit of progress. We're removing these barriers as we go along. And again, wouldn't it be amazing if there was something out there that allowed us to, in the moment, no matter what student we happen to be talking to at the time, to be able to identify somebody else having a stumbling block, to be able to assess and collect data there and then.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on to the purpose of collecting data, we have touched upon this slightly before, but again, just want to dig a little deeper into the different roles and the reasons you may be collecting data, because obviously it depends on your purpose again. We've mentioned in class, in the moment, and that type of data where it's just happening right there and then. And I think this is probably one of the most important things, because it's where you're providing instant feedback to pupils, and it is arguable that you would say that is where they're going to make most progress. As soon as they get feedback that is actionable and they can do something with it, that's where they're going to make most progress. So with this kind of formative assessment is brilliant, and if that can happen more, then more progress is going to be made. It does tend to be qualitative, so it is difficult to evidence, but it's gold dust. It's brilliant in the classroom. That looking again then to influence planning, again, this is often your formative stuff that's happened in the classroom. You're going around and you're having conversations with the pupils as they're working. You're thinking, actually, they haven't got as good an understanding of speed as I thought they had. They're mixing up the equation, they're doing that wrong. You can just get sort of influence from that, and then so you'll be thinking straight away in your head, right, next lesson is going to be a starter on this. It has to be, because they haven't quite got it, or whatever. The next point on this is then that leads further into determining intervention groups. So over time, you're gathering all this kind of qualitative data in your head. Most often, the amount of data that teachers are holding in their head, just because it's in the form of having conversations with people, will go on to determine intervention groups and things like that. And it's this type of data, these first 3 points, which will have a definite impact on pupil progress. And so I think as teachers, we can all see their worth and all see exactly what the intention is to do with that. Moving on, we all know we have to track pupil progress. We are legally obliged to track pupil progress twice a year. That's what the government says we need to do. And your tracking, it needs to be as accurate as possible. But quite often, you know that child's a grade 5 child. They're a classic grade 5 child. You know that, but it's how do I explain that? What evidence do I have to support that? And that is quite difficult to do. You may use your mark books, you may use your homework marks, but it can be quite difficult to quantify in some cases. The next one, reporting to parents and heads of departments, certainly for parents' evenings, I found being able to, as well as showing a mark book and saying, well, I know they're here and they got this on this test or whatever, I think the qualitative data that you have about their child is so important to impart to them. Like I know they're growing in confidence because they started asking some really in-depth questions, and that's a lovely bit of data to be able to pass on to parents. Assessing departmental progress, I know you will have done a lot of this, Al, as your head of department role. How did you assess progress as head of department?
So when you're assessing, and this would apply maybe to levels higher as well, not just within a department across a number of classes, but maybe across a number of subjects. What we need is something that is comparable between one class and another, where sort of teacher bias has been removed. I mean, we all know as teachers that we make the best of the learning environment that we can, and we get to know perhaps the more boisterous or the more vocal students perhaps better than we do for those students who kind of ghost away in the background. And when it comes to your tracking entry, or whatever you call your reporting system, without something that can be applied across the board to all those students with that bias removed, then the data you're getting perhaps isn't as robust. And I've worked in a number of different schools, and it's always been an issue. Are we really getting our tracking data as accurate as we could possibly get it? And if we're saying that this child is on a particular target, and the maths department or the geography department is saying that the same child is on this particular grade at the minute, how comparable are they really? How robust is that data? And when that gets to a senior management level, and senior management are looking at disparities in the grade that one child has got from student to student, they're going to be asking questions as, why is he doing so well in this subject? Why is he not doing so well in that subject? And the answer might not be anything to do with the teaching. It might not be anything to do with the work ethic or the learning dynamic in the classroom. It might simply be the procedure of how we're collecting that data and how reliable that data is. So the more that we can turn around and say, listen, we've collected this immense volume of data, especially if it's cost us very little hours to do it, the more happy and confident we're going to be with that data we're reporting. And at a departmental level, the chance of we get one or two chances per term at the minute. You've mentioned the 2 compulsory tracker reports got to send home, but as a head department, we might sit maybe 2 mini assessments, mini actual proper tests a term. You might have an end of term mock. So you don't really have vast amounts of opportunity to collect these big bits of data. But they are obviously, when we're looking across comparing classes, the most important bits of data that we can use.
Yeah. So I've mentioned tracking progress across school, which I think you've covered there as well, Al. And it's the evidence, and it's how robust that evidence is, which can be an issue. And again, like you say, cross department, particularly when subjects are so different. And then that often goes on to inform improvement plans, and you may be using other data at an SLT level, like Fisher Family Trust and Raise Online and things like that. So there is so much we could talk about data collection, but what we're going to do now is we are going to get a little bit interactive. So we're going to try and get you onto a task now, or 2 tasks, I might say. What I want you to do is I want you to open another tab, please. And this, if you can then type in the URL, it's www.lbq.org/task. I think Talitha's going to put that in the chat as well. Once you get to that page, thank you, nice one. If you just enter this code, so Y2JX, and then just follow the instructions, you'll be asked to put your name in. It will take you to a taskbar, and you can choose task 1, which is maths. James, I think I'm right with you, it's the best subject, and that was on ratio. And the other one is science, and it's not the topic you were talking about endlessly before, Alistair. I can't remember. I think it's on Redshift, isn't it? I'm not sure. Anyway, you've got 2 tasks there. You can choose your maths or science, but go on, have a go. The whole purpose of this is for you to see what learning by questions is like in the classroom. They are carefully structured question sets, which go from the simple to the complex, but the kids get feedback. Every single question has feedback, so the child can read through the feedback and learn from that, and it's directive. So we never say, no, you should have put this. It's designed to nudge them forward. So as you're working through, could you please have a look at trying to get some questions wrong, so we can see what's happening there. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking and let you get on and just try it out.
Just while they're doing that, Sue, can I mention something just about the so hopefully some people have managed to get logged on now and are working through these questions, and hopefully what you can see is if you are, I mean, do please deliberately get some questions wrong. And you'll see that you're getting instant feedback on any kind of misconception that, or any kind of misconception a student might have, any kind of lack of understanding. That feedback is instant, and sort of put yourself in the place of a teacher in the classroom who's got 30 students in front of you. Everybody might have that same question on a worksheet, and they've all got their hand up because not one of them, they need help to move on. As a teacher, you're rushing around from one student to the next, not trying to help them. But whereas in the teacher's absence here, we're getting that sort of teacher quality feedback. So please do deliberately get some of these questions wrong just to see the the student experience.
Okay, thank you so much for going on there. I can see we've got lots of people on the task. We've got fairly even numbers on both, actually. So we've got fairly even ones on the maths and the science. And I can see on the science we have a particular issue with question 3. We might have a look at that in a minute. We've got some people racing on. We've got some people who are even on to the next level for the science one there. It's all good. And we've got someone racing through as well on the ratio one too. It's weird. Teachers don't like to get things wrong. I'm the same. I'm always like, no, I won't get this wrong here. But yeah, I'll just keep you going for a minute or two more. You can really get a feel for it. Okay, right. What you should find is that I've paused the question sets for you. So I should have stopped you in your tracks. When you do this in a classroom, quite often you get a groan, and it's really nice to hear because you're like, why are you complaining? Because I've stopped you doing some maths. So yeah, it's a really nice feeling to get there. Okay, so I'm just I'm going to show you. I'll show you what I've got on my screen here. Let me just see if I can share my screen. This is where I usually do it wrong. Hopefully I'll do it right. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen there. So this is what we call our data matrix, and this is live in the moment. So this is the data that you have just produced. You might be able to spot yourself on there. I don't know. I won't show the names, but you can do that. There's lots of functionality in this. The single biggest thing about this data matrix here is that it's done my question level analysis for me, and it is in the moment. It is live. So right now I'm thinking, if this was a class of children, I'd be thinking question 4, I need to look at. I need to do something with that. So I can click on here. I can look at the responses. I can look at the question. I can show the responses here. There's lots and lots of functionality in there. So I can see what's going on. And I can see exactly what was the question that they were struggling with. And then I can talk through in class with them. And this is one of the big advantages of using a product like Learning by Questions in class. It's the live data that is there in the moment. I don't think there is anything else that will give you question level analysis that quickly that is actionable. And that is the thing, that is actionable in the moment. So before those misconceptions are embedded, before they've even had a chance to form, really, you can be on it and, having a go at it. We noticed that we had some people on both questions. I'll show you the science one as well. So we've got someone here racing through, doing really, really well, which is brilliant. And we've got something similar on the science as well. So this is the data for the science one. It doesn't hold back pupils. Those pupils who know it and get it, they can race through and get to some of the really, really meaty problem-solving questions. So it is really good for those, but it allows you to then drill down and think, actually, I need to go and spend time with this one particular person or this group of people. So it's wonderful data that can be acted on in the moment. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to unpause these. I don't know whether I should unpause these because then you'll stop listening to me and just keep doing the lovely questions. But we'll see. I'm going to just stop sharing. Oh, hang on, I'll do this. Tartha, can you see my slides again? Yes.
Yes.
Good. I've done it right. Brilliant.
There we go.
Okay. All right, so this is obviously just a screenshot of some live data that we had. So just to talk a little bit more about what Learning by Questions has, it's a platform with lots of pre-written question sets, and they are carefully scaffolded. All of our authors are maths and science teachers who've worked in the classroom. And the big thing is that they do provide that direct feedback in the moment of misunderstanding or if the children are struggling. A happy byproduct of this, because we use Learning by Questions in the classroom to learn. That's what we do. We learn by answering more questions, and that's what the whole product is about. A happy byproduct of this is we get lots of lovely data. And as we know, you can act on this in the moment, and it's there, and it's there for you to act on and sort everything out. Your question level analysis is done in a moment. You don't even need to look at the numbers. The colours will do it for you, and it leads directly to increased progression in the classroom. What you get over time, though, is a picture like this. So if you consider that each one of these squares, this square is a single lesson. And what I could do is I can just click on that and dive into that matrix I've just seen. So I can see exactly what went on in that lesson at that time. And it's all just stored for you. It's an automatic thing. So you get a lovely picture over time. So when you're talking about doing the tracking that we were talked about before, perfect. I can look across, I can see every single pupil in my class. Sam is doing amazingly well, got lots and lots of greens. He's got a bit of an issue with this topic here, but looking down from a class level, I think lots of people did. So that might be something I want to go back and intervene with. So you've just got so much data that is just generated as a byproduct of the learning. And it's very easy to spot the gaps over time and think about where you might want to go. So looking at using Learning by Questions specifically to evidence effective use of data. We've got the benefits of using the Learning by Questions question sets. Like I said, it's a byproduct. The data is a byproduct. And it can be acted upon immediately. And this kind of just enhances your own formative assessment that you do anyway. You know you do this. This is part and parcel of being a teacher, but it just enhances it, and also gives you tremendous insight to those pupils who actually you thought they knew it really well, but it turns out actually no, they've got a bit of a problem with something that you actually didn't realise it was there. So it's that insight it gives you that you don't get from anywhere else. Even if on a homework, you know, you get a homework in and they've got it all right, you don't actually know that it took them 6 times to answer that question, but you do know that with the Learning by Questions setup. Data can be viewed as a whole classroom, individual pupil as well. So you decide what you need to do as a teacher. You can drill down, you can look at individual pupils' responses to see if there is a particular misconception that undermines what they are doing wrong and all the questions, or you can have a look at it from a whole class perspective. As I mentioned, the question level analysis is done. It's done. It's there. You've got that quality data, but you don't need to troll through and do the question level analysis yourself. And everything is tracked and stored automatically. So I know we've bombarded you with lots and lots of information today about data, and also hopefully you've managed to get a feel for Learning by Questions in all of that. Are there any questions?
So we haven't had a ton of questions. So we've just had one, but I've actually answered it on the chat. So that was with this work for answers that have to be written rather than just math. So I said that we have coverage for secondary maths and science.
Yeah. The written questions, sorry, Talitha, to interrupt. The written questions, we do have quite a lot on some of them. When you get to reasoning questions, particularly math, we do have some what we call open questions where it is a written response. So it's kind of emulated this kind of show that questions you will get on a GCSE paper, or if we're testing a particular misconception, we want them to describe something. And that what they are, you would have to mark them yourself, but what they are brilliant at for using in class is as a discussion point, because using the system, you can go on, you can put it on screen, you can put the response on screen, or better still, you can put 2 responses on screen that essentially say the same thing. One of them's got the correct vocab in and one of them hasn't. And then you get a class discussion going and the children themselves decide which question is going to get more marks in the exam.
And not all the written questions have to be the lengthy sort of 6-marker type science question would have to be marked in class. You tend to get maybe one of those at the end of a question set so students can practice writing out those lengthier answers. But for example, questions such as what is the process that occurs in a mitochondria. You know, the questions are set up so a student could type in respiration, anaerobic respiration. They may type in respiration, but with a common spelling error, or anaerobic with a common spelling error. And the questions are designed to pick that up and to self-mark those. So if it's a case of short written answers, then yes, it will be self-marked by the system with built-in spelling corrections.
Just going back to the open...
another question. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going back to the open questions as well. Our feedback on those, rather than be directive, because it's a bit hard to be directive in that, is more like an exemplar answer. So it's more like what you would want to see, so they can see that constantly coming through.
The other question that's been asked is, are students able to get a report showing which parts of the curriculum they're struggling on?
They can see lesson by lesson what they have done, but it does tend to be just the lesson by lesson. So they can see on the matrix which questions they've struggled on, and they can see which ones they've struggled on over time. But it's learning by questions is really led by the teacher. We have so much faith in our teachers. We know you do an amazing job out there, and it's led by the teachers. The teachers know where the gaps are. The teachers know which question sets they can set to fill those gaps.
And of course, the teacher can use the historical data of those question sets to analyze and inform perhaps future intervention sessions, future revision sessions. And you know, they can take whatever data they need and pass on the data they want the students to have. So if they want a particular student to know that a focus for him in the upcoming revision area should be, I'm going to say it again, electrolysis, okay, then he can pass that on to them. So the teacher is absolutely fully in control. They have the data, they choose to use it how they want to use it for the kids. But what this does is it removes the time taken to do all that collecting. It removes the time taken to do all the inputting in spreadsheets. That's gone. And all the time spent using data is to use it for what it's meant for, which is for benefiting the kids.
Another question. So is this a system that I can input my own sets of questions, or are there set packages?
You can, it's fully adaptable actually. So we have written question sets aligned with the national curriculum and then exam board specs and things like that. So we've got data question sets out there. You can choose to take questions from our question sets and make your own question sets if you want to collate a little test specific to what you've done, but you can use it to actually write your own questions as well. So it is fully adaptable. It's got all sorts of whistles.
Do you know how many questions or question sets we've got on there now? There's
off the top of my head, I don't, but there's a huge amount. There's a huge amount, and question response
thousands.
Questions responses millions. But yeah, lots and lots there.
I'm going to ask this question because I know from last week's webinar that lots of people were talking about other platforms that they use. Yeah. And I was just wondering if you could explain to everybody on this webinar how we're different to other platforms.
I think we're trying to sort of drill it down into sort of key things really. The feedback, firstly, is huge. On an awful lot of platforms, you don't get feedback, or you will get the feedback that you are wrong. You should have answered 8 or whatever. All of our feedback is directive, bar the open questions where we do an exemplar answer. But all the other feedback is directive and specifically written for misconceptions if there are some. So if we've spotted that a speed distance time calculation, they're just going to switch it the wrong way round, we will have written that in as an answer, and we will include specific misconception feedback for that. So all our feedback is designed just to nudge the pupils forward. What the result of that is that the majority of the children can get on with the lesson themselves without your input as a teacher, and then your very valuable input can be for those children that really need it, that are really struggling. The carefully structured question sets is another thing. There is an awful lot of progression in our question sets. You didn't have quite enough time there to go on to some of the reasoning and problem solving questions, but they are challenging and they're really tricky to write actually sometimes, but they really are beautiful, and they've got lots and lots of steps in there. And then the other one obviously is the data. The data's just there for you, and it just saves you a job of doing that, but you can then analyze it super quick in the moment and use it to influence the pupils' progress over time.
Actually, Sue, would you be able to unpause the question set so that people can carry that on?
Let me just go back in and see if I think I did. I intended to. Whether I did or not, I don't know. No, well, good. They can still go. I think they're set to finish about 5:45 as well, so they can still go.
Okay. And could you just show the last slide as well, because there's an important web address on there.
Hang on.
Thank you so much.
Share screen.
Well, did you have something else you wanted to say just before I close up?
I was only going to add to the question of how we're different from other packages, and obviously Sue did a brilliant job explaining that. For me as a teacher, being in the classroom, something I wouldn't get from other packages would be that ability to make sure that no student in the classroom could be hiding or ghosting away or struggling and being too nervous to put the hand up. Some students don't like to do that. They don't like to bring attention to themselves, but with this package, you can see without anybody else in the classroom knowing that this particular shy student in the corner is struggling. You can waltz yourself over, give them a little bit of help, and I don't think there's anything like that in any other package that I've seen that allows you to respond. I think I've often said that the only sort of electronic package that I would be confident using in an Ofsted lesson, not that this is about just putting on a show for Ofsted, we know it's not, but the only package I'd be confident using would be a package like LBQ or LBQ, because there are no packages like LBQ, where I would have the Ofsted inspector in the corner and I'd be shoving that iPad in his face and saying, look what I can see. If you want to see personalized teaching, targeted questioning, if you want to see what that really looks like, have a look at that. And I'm going to go over now to James in the corner, because I know right now, 10 seconds ago, he struggled on that question and I'm going to help him. He's not even put his hand up to ask, and it's a really, really powerful tool for me. I think that's a great strength.
Oh, well, thank you for that. And thank you so much to all our attendees, and Sue and Al, thank you very, very much. Don't forget to sign up to our other webinars. We've got a few more webinars over the coming weeks, so feel free to go to those on Eventbrite. If you are interested in a trial of LBQ, you can trial it completely for free. So you can sign up to our 14-day trial or our 6-week trial, and both of those are for free if you follow the web address that's up on the screen there, www.lbq.org/try-LBQ. You can try for free, and you can have a look at the feedback and look at all the curriculum coverage that we've got there. And yeah, thank you so much, and hopefully see you next week for our next webinar. Thank you, everybody. Thanks. Bye.